So I think we're live now. Hi, Jeff. This is Ahmed from Gaper. Thanks for being on our show.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Sure. Would you like to give a brief about yourself? What do you do? Codeium, and how does it all work?
Yeah, so I lead business at Codeium. Codeium is an AI coding assistant tool. It has both chat and, of course, autocomplete. The cool thing about Codeium is we're able to self-host. So you have a LLM hosted internally, and then this has gotten the attention of some major companies like in the defense, healthcare, and finance sector. I'm also the host of a crypto show on Rocket Fuel Education, but that's on the side.
Right. And why Codeium? Why not ChatGPT? Why not Copilot? Let's cut to the chase.
Yeah, I think one thing, if you're a startup founder especially, is you want to be somewhere, you want to start small and then grow it big, right? And then if you're competing with the big players, you want to have some sort of differentiating feature. And then Codium is interesting in that they build their own foundational models. They have, the self-hosted capability. Just being able to host an LLM on a GPU and deploy that at scale is actually a very, very hard thing to do. If you look at all the companies out there, there's actually not that many people doing that. So that's why I chose Codium over any of these other AI companies.
Right. And what about the quality, right? So what we have heard in the AI space is that the more training data set you got, the better it is, right?
Yeah, actually,
So
the eval whole entire process is actually very complicated. But you can imagine like there's a lot of different code samples out there, and then we could test our LLM on all of them, right? And basically, every single model we train, we do many, many tests. We test on the quality of completions on existing code out there. We also have over 250,000 users now on our cloud product that we A/B test new models with too. So if we roll out a model and then the A side of the test is saying they're getting worse results or they're not accepting as much code, then we don't roll that model out. We'll just completely destroy the model and start a new one.
wow. So what does that mean? Do you have a million models going on in there? What code part is picked by what model? Sounds like a complex design there.
Yeah, so in general, these foundational models take a lot of time to train. Depending on the size, you can be from a couple of days or a couple of weeks, or something like GPT-4 obviously took a couple months to train. And we're always training. So at any given moment in time, there's a new model being trained, and it could be different sizing for different situations. For example, if you have a smaller GPU, we actually have a smaller model that it can fit for that company or that enterprise customer. And then for our free users or our cloud users, we actually have larger and larger models all the time. And that's why we keep training. There's just constantly something we're experimenting with or constantly building from scratch, essentially.
Got it. And what's the primary audience you're looking at?
Oh, for Codium, it's all developers. And then the funny thing is, like, there's some interest now from system integrators or from executives, and we're getting call outs from a lot of different types of companies and types of kind of expertise. And everybody wants to learn more about AI right now, right? Because AI can be applied to almost every use case. Even the stuff we're doing, we're focused on developers, but it doesn't mean you can't just swap out the model for something that's more focused for another industry, right? We're not focusing on that now. We just want to make the best possible AI product for developers. But again, that's something that can happen because there's so many things going on in the LLM space.
Right. So that's your primary audience, right? So you
Mhm.
talked about beyond developers. So what can you share a couple of use cases where somebody in normal, like an average Joe, can come in, test out, build up something who's not too deep into tech?
Yeah, I mean, if you've seen ChatGPT, right, it can do almost anything in any sector, right? It's pretty amazing, and there are things that people have still discovered to this day, right? I think last week they rolled out a PDF analyzer, and you could like insert a PDF and ask it questions on it, and even create a new document on that data, right? So some amazing things are happening in the general space. The problem is if you are a startup, right, and you are focusing on providing value to a customer, going general is very hard, right? If you're building a general model, you're probably not going to beat ChatGPT. It's just too good, right? But if you focus on fine tuning or building a model that's for specific purposes, you might get something that actually does have value to the customer. So it's just a few examples that are very popular out there, like customer support, right? If you answer a ticket, auto reply to a ticket, these things can be done easily with these foundational or these LLMs. And if you want to do something like ask about your company's documents, ask about some files, right? These are all things that, like, for example, Microsoft is rolling out next week, and things that like Glean, for example, like you can search your entire documents to find something you want. But basically, there's a lot of use cases out there, and I think if you are someone who's thinking about getting into the AI space, the thing you should do is find something that has value today, focus your training and your models on that, and then you can expand to other use cases. So right now we are focused on developers.
Right. And what's the primary advantage? Let's say if I am I own a company, we have 100 developers in there. So do you think that the average time of development will decrease, or the efficiency per engineer will increase, or a bit of both?
Yeah, this is very, very interesting. So, the funny thing is, in Codeium, we provide a dashboard of how much time you're saving and how much money you're saving, depending on the salary of the developers. But it varies, right? It depends on the organization. Maybe the developers are more junior, maybe they're more senior, or maybe they don't code as much as other teams. Some teams might code, 12 hours a day, and they're using Codeium and they're saving tons and tons of time, right? Our target for a given developer is going to be about like 5 hours a month, or maybe you could say like $300 or $500 even of savings per developer, right? And then that actually translates also to faster feature release time, right? We can't measure that for you. I think it's going to be on your side to see if that happens. But we've heard some feedback that it makes it from 80% to 100% faster development time. So, if you think you have a 1 month release window, maybe you can do it in 2 weeks, right? And in theory, people are bothering each other less too. The junior developers are not tapping the senior developers on the shoulder as often, and they're performing faster as well. So basically, the entire team accelerates in multiple directions, in multiple ways.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. So what's the direction like? So Codeium, right? This is what you already have, right? What are the bigger goals to achieve in the next 6 months to 1 year?
Yeah, I think the one thing we're always focused on is addressing bigger parts of the software development lifecycle, right? So after you finish your coding, where do you go next? You probably go to your terminal, right? So we're going to release the terminal feature within the next month. We'll be able to autocomplete, even like the pushing the Git repo stuff, and then we even have like stack trace debugging. So if you execute code, we actually can see the stack trace that happens and give you a chat kind of response as to what's going on. Like, oh, the code isn't working because of this and this, right? So even other features, like I said in the chat, like debugging code, making code more optimized, writing unit tests. These things are like stuff that people probably don't think about these coding assistants doing, but we're covering more and more stuff, right? The entire process of coding for a developer is not just writing code. There's stuff before, there's stuff after that we're going to eventually reach into very quickly, actually.
So how far are we in the world when we write your platform that, hey, can you write me code to fly an aeroplane, and everything gets done? How far are we from reaching something closer to that?
I think that's probably about a year out. So flying airplane is a very generalized description. You probably need to say something like, write me a system in Python that does calculates the physics behind how to fly an airplane, and then eventually you spread that more. It's like, where does that plug into? Where does that integrate to? So then your chat prompt needs to be very wide coverage of like, this is the different systems we need to connect. Here's what I need each system to do. Write the code for each system. Now deploy it into these other, where these repositories are, right? And I think, again, 1 year out is not that long, right? But we are like about a year out from something similar to that. You can already write something and deploy it today. But in terms of like, we're rolling out into really big enterprise customers. We don't want to just release that today. We want to make sure that there's some safeguards and some, I guess, like the quality is good enough to do before we release that.
Right. In where do you see the best utility of your platform? Is it on the pure dev side? Is it on the QA side? Is it like automation side? So what are the best use cases where you say, hey, we are good enough to go to anywhere in the world and beat anyone?
It's weird. It varies even among use cases. Like some companies have the same use case and they get different results from different types of developers. But I would say the best way to kind of guess where this is best at is kind of what is the most common kind of use cases that are already out there. Because at the end of the day, AI is just taking what exists and what's available to train on. And if you train on a lot of data that is very common, that those use cases are probably going to be very, very solid because you're building something that has a very, very large data set to compare to, right? It's going to be bad at when it's like a net new thing or there's not enough code out there to find, right? And then that would require either additional training on our side or maybe some fine tuning or maybe some like embeddings that you create across the repo. There's a lot of strategies to make it better, but at the end of the day, if there's less code out there or less kind of examples of it, AI is not going to be as good at it.
So personally speaking, I see you have a journey coming from the business side and then going to the investor side, being a partner at a fund as well, and ending up being uh, in this product company, right? So how does that look like? Because usually people go the other way around.
Yeah, like they just wouldn't take my investment, so I had to actually come in and do some work, I suppose. But just to kind of jokingly aside, um, whenever you have a new kind of technology that is disruptive, you kind of want to be there at the very, very early innings before there's even like these outrageous valuations, right? And you can look around right now at AI valuations, and honestly, I think we're already there, right? Anthropic just raised like $6 billion, right, in the last month from Amazon and Google. Like, if you're a company that can raise $6 billion pre-revenue, by the way, I mean, there's some revenue, but like basically, this is insane multiples on this kind of technology. So if you're a VC right now trying to invest in AI companies, it's going to be kind of hard to find one that is like worth less than like hundreds of millions of dollars, essentially, right? You got to invest extremely early or pretty much not at all. It's going to be hard to like get 100x on like a Anthropic, for example.
Right. And what's Codeium take on unit economics? Because I'm asking this because there are two extreme mindset in the world today. One is ChatGPT mindset that you can burn $700,000 a day, right? Which accounts to $25 million a month on burning on the server side, and you need to scale versus the BART and a few others as well who would come in and say, hey, unit economics needs to be positive. We are going to stay in this business for long term, right? So these two poles in the AI world today. So which
Yep.
side are you on?
I'm on both sides, believe it or not. So the great thing about Codeium is the team started as an AI infrastructure company. So they were building hardware to train massive workloads, and for about like I think like 30x more efficient than any other product offering out there. That gives us the ability, by the way, not only to like train more efficiently, but to also run at scale. So if this, I'm trying to think of what is not under NDA, but basically for an A100, for example, we can hold 500 developers on top of it, right? So if you do the math on that, you look at something like Copilot, who's losing 20 to $80 per user, right, a month is what Copilot is losing. You do the math backwards, you're ending up at around maybe 30 to 50 users per A100, assuming that's what they're using. That's my guess. So we have like a rough 10x unit economics advantage over, I think, almost anybody out there. And we go to a lot of AI conferences and we talk to people, and I don't think anybody has fit 500 developers on a single GPU, right? So I think that's very important for people to understand. Like, if you are trying to run a business and you're losing money, like if you have to charge $100 a user just to break even, that's not necessarily a good business, because you're not making money. But number two is, like, if you scale that, you also need the capital to scale that, because you're burning money and you add another million users. Okay, now I have to burn another 20 million users just to serve these 1 million users, right? But Microsoft can do that. They have the capital expenses, right? But for a startup founder who they probably do not have $20 million laying around, that's something to really think about. But for us, we did work backwards. We got the unit economics down, and then now we're able to scale. Like right now, again, we're at 250,000 free users on our cloud platform. But even for enterprise users, it's like zero marginal costs, because they use their GPUs and we deploy the software to it, right? So very, very again, very important to us that we are a profitable company, right?
Right. So are you looking to become a Tesla, like send your own infra to others as well and operate as well, like they do with their electric motors and stuff, or do you want to just build up vertically and capitalize on top of it yourself? So is there a
I
dual
think
strategy or one way?
Yeah, I think the best play for us is to focus on the software and deploying that. We do have partnerships with some hardware vendors now. You'd probably seen the Dell, there's a Dell blog post we deployed internally at Dell. Again, it's a strategic thing for them to have a partner that they can host an LLM on their infrastructure and then they deployed others, right? So that's just an example of one, but there's quite a few other routes we can go here of just saying like, here's a plug and play box, kind of like your PlayStation 5 or something. You plug it into your monitor and you start playing video games, right? That is eventually the route we want to go, right? From all these partners. But right now for us, the focus is on having a very, very easy to deploy software. Honestly, it's just like a Docker Compose app. You run it internally, and then you can run it across the whole organization. And it's like you're using a cloud product, but all your IP stays with you, right? The code is obviously one of the most sensitive things you can send out there in the cloud.
Yeah. In listening to all this, it seems like you have an amazing tech. So where is it based? How does it look like? Is it like globally distributed, or you are all ex OpenAI people?
No, we're all. I mean, there's a lot of like MIT folks and ex Neuro folks, very very smart people. We're all based in Mountain View, actually.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah.
nice. So you mentioned that you run your own podcast as well, because before we say bye, do you want to share a little bit about your podcast and what it covers and what's the title?
Yeah, it's funny. I never was officially full time in crypto, but I just started writing about it, and people started subscribing. So now I'm stuck with it. So it's called Rocket Fuel Crypto. It's at rocketfuelcrypto.com. So I still write that on the side, but my main focus now is trying to build Codeium, which is Codeium, to be a company that is one of the next great AI companies.
Got it. And before we part, when are we gonna see $100,000 Bitcoin?
Okay, so probably in April if we do, because
Got it.
there's a whole ETF like hype going on right now, which has made it jump up like 10 to 15%. But the halving is always a narrative that people get crazy about, and personally, I'm just like, these are all just narratives. Like, don't get out of control, right? But April of next year, there's going to be another like hype cycle, a lot of media coverage, and it's just all kind of BS. But the public, gets really, they have FOMO. They want to get in. So 100K Bitcoin is possible by then, but obviously the macro situation is a little unpredictable right now.
Yeah, got it. So thank you so much for your time today. Best of luck for the Codeium. We are gonna put the spelling up with the podcast. No worries about that. So thank you so much for your time today.
Yes, thanks for having me.